This is the Hope Not Note podcast,
where we answer your questions and share inspirational stories to fill your soul with hope.
Our mission is to empower hope to those who have been plagued by nope.
I'm Dr. Dylan Caswell.
And I'm Brandy.
And we're here to bring you out of the nope and into hope.
Welcome back to the Hope Not Note podcast. We hope that you are enjoying your day. Go get some sunshine, go enjoy nature, whatever you want. Just soak in the beauty around you. That is my hope for you today. We're diving right into our question. Our question is from a listener named Jules, and she asks, how can I be more optimistic?
That is a phenomenal question.
It's very broad in general.
It's very broad in general.
But we hope we can do justice.
I have a few different answers on it. And I know you don't like it when I do this, but I'm actually going to spin it back to you.
Of course. Is it because I used to be so pessimistic?
Yes. Yeah. So what better response to get than from a person who has turned to more optimism and what you found to work during that.
I did not.
And then I'll provide my side of it.
I did not expect you to do that. Well, I think of my brother will always be like, you're a negative Nancy to like people who are negative. And like, I kind of wish the person who asked the question's name was Nancy because I think it'd be hilarious. But being a negative Nancy was a huge part of my life for a long time. It's interesting because now the older I get, the more I do see such a joyful person that I was as a kid, mainly because, and we talk about our niece all the time, but my dad says that my niece reminds him of me because she'll be playing basketball and super competitive, but she's always smiling, always laughing, being nice, helping kids up if they fall. And I remember being like that as a kid. And if I'm being honest, somewhere in my teens, I slowly started getting pretty negative. I'd have a spirit of complaining. I would kind of see the worst in the world. And I know part of it is just like teen angst. And then I know another part of it was starting to realize I had traumas that I didn't know how to deal with. Like there were so many layers. And so how I came out of kind of that pessimistic attitude, a big part of it was dealing with the traumas that I'd been through. And there wasn't anything like crazy, but every person has trauma. It's just part of our life. And every person has something to work through to help them have a better mental health and physical health. And so I think for me, a big part of it was starting to look at those different traumas. But in that, you almost get more pessimistic. You almost have to like go deeper into the suck in order to like catapult yourself out. And so I remember as I started dealing with my traumas, I became even more pessimistic, which I wish I didn't. But the reality is like you kind of I had to get messy before healing.
Mm-hmm.
But having someone to journey with you through that, whether it's a counselor or a friend that is willing to help, or a family member that is willing to help and they're not going to carry it themselves. Like you have to make sure that they are in a healthy place to help you through your traumas. Having someone to journey with you is key because they're the ones that help you keep perspective and they're the ones that are slowly leading you towards optimism. For me, that was having people remind me to be grateful and forcing myself into having a gratitude practice daily. We talk about gratitude often. It's in the book. It's in multiple past podcasts. But if you're not practicing gratitude, I would argue to say that you're not really optimistic. And don't get me wrong, I am not a Pollyanna by any means. Do you know what Pollyanna is? So there's this like movie or something from like way back in the day. And I think the girl's name was Pollyanna, but she was like excessively optimistic, happy, joyful, almost to the point that it was like annoying. And I had someone in my life that started being like that and people started calling her a Pollyanna and it almost made me more cranky because I was like, no. So I'm not a Pollyanna to the sense of like, I'm not always this like happy, joyful, optimistic, whatever. I think I'm kind of more realistic, but when you're realistic, you have to teach yourself to be more optimistic rather than like going into the pessimism world. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, so dealing with your traumas, having community to support you and gratitude, like that's a recipe for a great life regardless. But I think that that's a huge part of my journey in becoming more optimistic.
Yeah. Yeah.
But your turn.
So I would say it comes down to the first pillar of hope, self-agency. That you have to have the ability to say, I do have some control in the way that I am, my outlook on particular situations. Optimism versus pessimism. Pessimism is a choice. It's a choice. And I know it's not an easy choice to make, to be optimistic versus pessimistic, but it is a choice. And what allows you to make that choice is your developed belief system. Whatever you're seeking, you will find. I could go out for a walk around the block and find everything that's wrong in society, in community, in the world, or I can go out and find all the good things. And that's a choice. That's a choice that you have to make consciously, day in, day out. Every moment you're looking for what is the positiveness in this. When obstacles come up, when adversity comes up, our first thing is to go, well, oh crap, my idea is squashed. My vision isn't going to be achievable. The mission is over. And people and businesses that succeed, they keep an optimistic outlook. Hey, that didn't quite work out, but I learned so much from it. I'm going to take what I learned and start a different business and go and try that again. Look at how Airbnb came to be, how many times they failed before they actually landed on this thing that worked. The Savannah Bananas, in the spirit of wearing the yellow in this episode, the Savannah Bananas, they put a lot of money into it and did not quite get the outcome at first, but they stayed optimistic. They kept thinking big, and now they're selling out MLB stadiums around the country. They have a wait list. For MLB teams are like, man, I wish I could sell out a game. Minor league teams are using any promotion possible just to try to get people there. The Savannah Bananas are going around and selling out their fields with wait lists. And it was because despite the obstacles, despite the adversity, they had self-agency and made the choice to look at the brighter side of the things that may be perceived as failures. So it comes down to self-agency. It comes down to your belief system. And in that belief system, in order for people to become optimistic, if they do find themselves sitting in pessimism, is we have to ask, what are you attaching to? Because oftentimes when people are pessimistic, it's because they're attaching to material things that society has taught them that you need to be attached to, and that if you get to this level, then that means that you achieved it. So many people spend time just working up these different ladders to get to a promotion. If they get a promotion, then they can get a house, and they get a house, then they can get the nice car. If they get the nice car, then they can get the nice dinners and all these different things. And when that starts to not work out, then they start to feel like they're a failure. They start to feel like they're rejected. They start to feel like there's no way through. And when we take a step back and we detach from the material things, and we stay optimistic in the sense of, hey, there's a plan for each and every one of us. And if we stay obedient, there's going to be obstacles, there's going to be adversity, but the outcome is going to be there if we stay obedient and we start putting the work in and we remain in that bucket of self-agency. So oftentimes it's, well, why do you have a poor outlook on life? Because what are you looking at for that outcome? What are you attaching your worth to versus what should it be attached to?
Oh, so much to unpack. We just watched an amazing movie. What was it called?
I'm trying to remember.
The A Man Named Otto.
Oh, Man Named Otto.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, if you want to cry, throw on that movie.
If you're struggling to be optimistic, I honestly, I would say watch that movie. It's beautiful. It's kind of dark at some times, but it is an amazing journey of a man who is pessimistic, who really goes out in the world to find everything wrong with it, and how in the midst of that, slowly over time, someone cracks through and shows how the world is not all that bad. And it is an amazing movie. I want to talk all about it, but I feel like I would rather our listeners go watch it. I would say like don't watch it with kids
Mm-hmm.
for sure. It is a little like dark. It's definitely more of an adult movie just because of the complex like depth to it. But oh my goodness, just go watch that movie.
Yeah, there's 4 human emotions. You experience them all
Yeah,
during that
all at
movie,
once.
all at once. It's an incredible movie. But another important point that you brought up too is that, well, what helped the main character start to see life differently was because a person stayed persistent to give him purpose.
Yeah.
And once he had that purpose restored, then his outlook started to change.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd also look at, again, like, what is your belief system? What are you attaching to? What is your purpose? And you may not know that right now. That's okay. Like, keep working, keep searching. Again, what you seek, you will find.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about this before on the podcast, but just to bring it up again, there's a famous study from Dartmouth called the Dartmouth Scar Study. And in this study, what they did is they put a makeup scar on a person's face and then had them go into an interview. And they were instructed during the interview to write down how many times they felt like they were being discriminated against because of the scar on their face. But as they were going into the interview, another person intercepted them and said, "Oh, I got to go touch up your scar a little bit. Come with me." And they wiped off the scar. The person going into the interview, they didn't know that the scar had been wiped off. So now they're in an interview and they're looking for reasons that they're being discriminated against because the scar on their face that doesn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And when they came out of that interview, they sat down and said, "Well, did you feel like you're discriminated against? What did it look like?" And they had a whole list of times they felt like they were being judged and discriminated against something that didn't exist. But because they were looking for it, they were able to find that.
Yeah.
As many negatives as we can find in this world, and they're always present, and there's always temptation to start believing in those negative things. There's a balance.
Mm-hmm.
If you search for the positive things, you will find those positive things. I see it so many times driving around. Like, driving around, everyone is always like, "Oh, you can be grumpy and yelling and stuff like that." And I'm like, no, driving around, like, I get to see the positives because I'm looking for the positives. Most of the time you see that. Sometimes there's still some people that will cut you off and stuff like that. But just driving back from a client's house a few days ago, I saw 3 lemonade stands. 3 lemonade stands of little kids out there in the heat, grinding to make a buck, selling lemonade. It used to be 25 cents, inflation.
Yeah.
Right? The boom, negative. We can find the negative. Positive. Wow. This kid is out there on a corner selling lemonade and they're not on their phones or a tablet. Right? So same situation, but you can look at it from different lenses depending on what you choose to look at it with. And I completely get it because we work with a lot of people that have been through a lot of difficult things and a lot of hard things. And oftentimes when they become optimistic, people are like, how?
Yeah.
How did they do that? And so is it easy? No. But like in the book, we talk about simple, not easy solutions. And this is one that is simple, not easy, is turning the pessimism to optimism. And there is research showing that if you force a smile, that eventually you will start smiling more.
Oh, that goodness. I have so many things, but I'll just say 2 of them. One of them, I had a friend who struggled with pessimism and was not a morning person, but had to get up at 5:30 every morning. And so before she would get out of bed, after her alarm, she would sit there and smile for like 2 to 5 minutes. And it would be an obnoxious smile. She would literally just be like smiling huge, as big as she could, because she did not want to get out of bed. She was groggy. It was too early, all the things. But eventually that helped her have a good attitude to start the day with. So maybe you need to do that. There's times where I'm like, I'm struggling. And so and if I'm on my way somewhere or whatever, driving, or if I'm going to the bathroom, like I will like purposely smile for longer than what is comfortable, because it does really help me get in a better mood and a better mindset. Lastly, before our hope stories, I remember hearing this story when I was in high school or maybe college, but Toby Mac, he's a Christian music artist. He's been making music for well before I was born. Like, he's been making music since he was like in his 20s, if not older, if not more than that. And I think he's in his 50s now. So long before I've been born. Anyways, Toby Mac has a beautiful song called Speak Life. And in the music video, I think it's before, it's kind of like at the beginning or whatever, but also when I've seen him in concert, he kind of has this dialogue and he tells you like there's no such thing as a neutral interaction. There's only positive and there's only negative. And so I think a lot of people go about their life thinking that everything's neutral. And the reality is that's not the case. Every interaction you have, everything you do is either going to be towards life or it's going to be the opposite. And I really love that perspective because it makes me realize like I need to do everything I can to be speaking life, to be living life and giving life to people rather than the opposite. And I think that having that perspective of do I want to give life allows you to be more optimistic. So, all right, Dill, what's your hope story?
Yeah, last point adding on, and then I'm going into my hope story, is once you develop an optimistic outlook, don't let people steal it from you. Don't let it happen. When I started podcasting, I'll never forget it. I got an email from a person saying, love your podcast. The content's great. The work you put into it, the research you put into it is phenomenal, but you don't say the word especially right correctly. I still don't know how to say it. And I had to fight to remain optimistic because had this lady known that I grew up with a speech disorder and out of 5,000 words in a podcast, I said one word incorrectly, like I could have been so negative mindset about that. I'm not cut out to do this. I can't say an easy word simply. No, sorry, lady, you're not going to steal my optimism. And I don't think she was trying to. She may have just been like, honestly, like trying to help out. Like maybe she was a grammar teacher. Maybe she was an English teacher. Don't know. But the point is, you're not going to take this optimism away from me. I'm going to keep my positive mindset. I'm going to keep moving forward, regardless if I say that one word correctly or incorrectly. How do you say it? Especially. Yeah. I had an extra C in there, I think. Yeah. Especially.
Sometimes people do like X, like EX, especially too. Yeah. It's a hard word.
Hard word. English is hard.
Yeah.
English is hard.
So what's your hope story?
So my hope story, I kind of spilled the beans too early on it. But it was the lemonade stands.
Oh.
Just seeing these lemonade stands out there. And I don't know how long they've been out there, but these containers are just roasting in the sun. And seeing there was one stand that older gentleman had stopped and he got one, and he's standing there with a girl, and she's probably, I don't know, 10, 11 years old, and they're both sitting there with their one hand on their hip, sipping on the lemonade, watching cars go by, and they're both laughing. And it was just so special. And it just, I don't know, I'm an old soul, so when I see those things, it just like makes me so happy that stuff like that is still happening.
We saw one the other day and we were like in a rush. And so I just kind of smiled and kept going. And I was like, if for no other reason than the lemonade stands, have cash in your car.
Yeah.
Like have $5 on you. Cause I thought like literally we had iced coffee. We didn't need lemonade. But if I had a couple quarters or if I had $1 on me, like I would have 100% wanted to like just encourage those kids. Cause I remember people doing that for me when I was younger, you know, and most of the time we didn't do lemonade, we did Kool-Aid. So that's a beautiful hope story.
And I want to challenge people, instead of buying a cup, buy the whole jug.
Right.
Shock the kiddos. Hey, you're working hard out here. I'm going to give you value that was unexpected. I'll buy that whole jug off you right now.
Yeah.
Really? Yep. Give me that jug.
I remember someone giving us $20 as a kid, and they didn't even like take a glass. Yeah. They were just like, here you go, because they were so like happy to see the hustle, you know?
And to a kid, making $5 at that age, that's a lot of money for kiddos. Like you make $20 and you're like, I don't have to work a day again in my life. Yeah. I just made $20. So it's definitely pay it forward, look for those opportunities. And you want to make the world a more positive place, make people more optimistic, put the work in, lift people up that are out there doing the positive things.
Well, my hope story, I'm really shocked that you didn't share this. And so I'm stealing it because maybe you would share it in a future podcast. But we have awesome neighbors that I've known since I moved to Syracuse. And their grandkid I've known since he was born, which was 7 years ago. And Dylan and him had a water balloon fight. And it was awesome. And the reason I'm bringing it up, one, having neighbors that say, hey, come over, like, come say hi, come grab a s'more. Like that is such a beautiful gift. And this world is missing that. And so, number one, like they just invited us over to have a s'more. We didn't have a s'more because the grandkid was there. And basically, he is a mini version of Dylan. Like they're just kindred spirits. They're both just joyful. The youngest sibling wants to have fun. They both have curly hair, big smiles. And they had these reusable water balloons, which if you have not gotten those, not that we're sponsored by them by any means, but you should go get them because they're really cool. They're kind of in the shape of a ball, but then you can reuse them, so it's not like destroying the earth with like the plastic, and it's easier to like fill up and go. But the reason it's my hope story, one, being able to just have fun with little kids is so life-giving. But the reason he was over at his grandparents' house was because instead of buying a gift, a material item for their grandchildren, they get to spend a whole day with their grandparents doing whatever they want. So this kid he said he wanted to go to the movies, he wanted to go get ice cream. Like his whole birthday present was just a day with his grandparents, and he was spending the night at their house, and they had s'mores. And um, his grandparents aren't just necessarily down in the grass, like dodging the water balloons with him. But then when Dylan and I came over, it was like a full on war, and it was awesome. And it ended because we needed to go get dinner. It ended with him being like, "Well, I'm gonna dump the rest of the bucket of water on your head, Dylan." And Dylan goes, "Well, then I'm gonna dump the rest of this one balloon I have left, like on your head." And Dylan said, like, only a youngest child is gonna like say yes to that like deal, but they're both the youngest, and so they both said yes to the deal. So Dylan opened up the water balloon on his head, but then he dumped the entire bucket on Dylan's head. It was just awesome and so joyful. And I don't know, hearing that story, like, why wouldn't you be optimistic?
Yeah.
So that's my little
Oh, all right. If we can go in reverse.
put it in reverse, Terry.
I want to add in one more point to the optimistic mindset and developing it, because you just brought it up with thinking of community and who you surround yourself with. As you grow, you may look at your circle and your relationships, and you may outgrow some relationships. You may decide that, hey, you know what? I don't want to be around this person because they just drain me every time, and I never get any energy back. And I've invested into this relationship, but it's the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. When researchers looked at placing a purposely pessimistic person, I like that word, purposely pessimistic person, into a group, it didn't matter how many people are optimistic. That pessimistic person, that pessimism grew like a plague among the team. And all of a sudden, this team started to become more and more pessimistic with the goal that the researchers had given them. We see it all the time in sports of why these superstars are getting traded to different teams. Yeah, they are phenomenal players, but they're not great humans in the locker room. And the organizations have realized, yeah, this boat's not being put in the same direction because one person's rowing in the wrong direction. So for us to move in this direction, let's get rowing and get everybody on the same page with that. Now, I'm not saying you need to go and just dump everybody in your life, but you just need to be a little bit more conscious of who is allowing you to gain energy because of their optimism, who is draining you because they're always pessimistic, and then making that conscious decision of what are you going to invest your time into. Because it is this pay it forward of you gain optimism from hanging out with someone, you should be now returning that to somebody else. But again, if that person isn't receptive and they keep pulling you down and dragging you down, and for woe is me, life is terrible, life sucks, it's never going to get better, like that puts a toll on you. Especially when you're trying to turn your pessimism to optimism. So choose your team wisely and know that your team may change throughout seasons, and that's okay for that to happen. There's the thing of where we're always loving every individual, but there are some times that you need to love from a distance instead of spending time with them every single day for X amount of time.
Well, and we hope that this episode empowers you to be a good team member as well, empowers you to be more optimistic, to be more joyful, and know that you bring us joy by listening to our podcast. If you want to bring us even more joy, we'd love for you to share it, to like, review, give it a star, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to us on YouTube. All of that is so helpful for getting this message of hope, this message of empowerment, this message of optimism out to people.
Yeah, challenge for the week. We should get an alarm like challenge for the week. Right, challenge for the week. Many people have a team meeting or a talk that they're doing with the people around them that they work with or your family. Start off with something incredibly optimistic that no one is expecting, and just start the tone of the meeting with optimism, and just watch how that room changes. If the Debbie Downer or negative Nancy pops up with other things, okay, great, let's turn it back around to optimism. One thing we learned from leadership conference is when generally the pessimist can be very realistic, but that reality we may disagree with. And instead of asking, in that situation, instead of asking, why do we do that? Or how do we do that? You just go, wow, that's a great idea. How do you propose that we move forward with it? Or like, okay, what are the next steps into that? So just reframing that a little bit from that, like, why, or that's not possible, to, okay, like, let's chat about it. That's a brilliant idea. You're thinking big. You're thinking so big right now. Got really in a little bit, but I want to keep that positive juice rolling.
I love it.
Yeah. So that's your challenge for this week. Start a meeting or family dinner or hanging out with a friend with just something optimistic and positive that they maybe weren't expecting, and just watch how the rest of that interaction changes. Have a great week. And remember, every day is not just a day to be hopeful. It's an opportunity to become hope.
The Hope Not Know podcast is meant for educational, informational, and personal development purposes only, and does not constitute any health or medical advice. If you're looking for specific advice, connect with us to work with a Hope coach. The Hope Not Know podcast shall not be liable or responsible for any loss or damage allegedly arising from any information or suggestions in this podcast.